I take my cue for today's reflection from our response after the first reading. He who does justice will live in the presence of the Lord. Traditional scholastic philosophy speaks of justice as based on what is due. The Latin word is debitum, that is, what is owed to someone else. Biblical tradition as a whole and the readings today in particular show us what this due, debitum, is all about and to whom we owe it. To widows, to the poor, to strangers, and to orphans, everyone who has no one else to rely on. God's justice shines best in His compassion, His mercy, His loving kindness. Today's readings offer us a whole lot more on this issue about the issue of the debitum. It refers to a state of healthy tension between two seemingly irreconcilable polar realities. It refers to a delicate balance between giving too much attention on one to the detriment of the other, between being present to oneself and one's concerns and being present to others, including and most of all, God Himself. Thus, in the first reading, Abraham's attention is being meaningfully and actively present to three strangers who happened to pass by his dwelling. His hospitality and his giving due concern to weary and hungry travelers was ultimately looked at kindly by God, who rewarded him and Sarah with a son. Abraham's generous and selfless act of attending, that is, being fully present to his guests, occasioned more than just a visitation from above. He literally lived in the presence of the Lord after giving what was due to his guest messengers from God. Good old Henry Nouwen years back had already written about the need for us to cultivate this virtue of hospitality. He contrasts hospitality with hostility and says that spirituality, among other things, ought to be a movement from hostility to hospitality. At the risk of misrepresenting his ideas, I would like to suggest that this virtue is basically what this delicate balance is all about. Hostility is to be focused on oneself and one's concerns, on one's needs and wants, as to be effectively against the same needs and concerns of others. Hostility, which comes from the Latin word for enemy, is to be turned against others, while hospitality, which comes from the Latin word for guest, connotes being turned towards others. Our world now is deeply mired in a culture of hostility, in what Pope St. John Paul II called the culture of death. People cannot even be magnanimous enough to welcome new life into their busy, cluttered, and self-centered lives, so they have to kill babies. People polarize themselves and align themselves with either the pro-life or pro-choice banners, reducing morality to a superficial choice between two political ideologies. Nations are preoccupied defining and safeguarding borders to prevent outsiders and strangers from coming in. Civilizations try to outdo each other in a mad race to eradicate each other in a violence and hate-ridden world of terrorism and counterterrorism. The so-called G8 industrialized nations are aeons ahead of what I call the P8, the most impoverished nations of the world. A great social, economic, cultural, developmental, moral, and spiritual divide separates the so-called lender from the enslaved debtor countries. Within individual nations, divisions and distinctions abound between the haves and the have-nots. Hostility, not hospitality, seems to be the name of the game. The Lord today offers us not a set of new rules, but a different paradigm, a vision, a distinct way of looking at things. Instead of rules and prohibitions that many people mistakenly identify Christian morality with, He offers us a virtue, an interior attitude of heart and mind. He offers us a path that does not give quick and instant solutions, but which slowly leads to a gradual personal and social transformation. The Lord offers us a path away from hostility to hospitality. He offers us a spirituality. What then are the hallmarks and elements of this spirituality? Abraham shows us how doing justice, that is, giving more to those who have less indeed, can lead to living in the Lord's presence. He shows us how being attentive to others' needs can give our lives that needed state of balance and spiritual equanimity. Indeed, as the old song goes, whilst there is enough for everyone's need, there is never enough for everyone's greed. Hospitality in Abraham's example came into full bloom in charity. This same spirituality that molds us all into one body, the church, also makes it possible for us, like St. Paul, to rejoice in our sufferings in order to fill up what is lacking in the afflictions of Christ on behalf of His body, which is the church. Hospitality becomes transformed to hopefulness. Hostility becomes replaced by gentility and gracious charity. This is the same charity and love that led Martha and Mary to learn from each other as each showed their own version of sincere and effusive love for the Master. Mary sat beside the Lord at His feet, listening to Him speak. Martha was burdened with much serving. Both did what they did, for they both sincerely loved the Lord. Different strokes for different folks, as they say, but motivated by the same love and devotion. I would like to caution my readers to go easy on condemning Martha and facetiously favoring Mary. No, the Lord does not intend to make us choose to either do a Martha or do a Mary act. He wants us to do both. The Lord leads us to a healthy balance between two extreme poles. Spirituality is not something we attain once and for all, but something we grow into. If this spirituality is genuine, there ought not to be tension between tasks and people. Both are important. Both need our attention. We need to serve, that is, engage in diaconia. But we also need to sit still and listen and take care lest we forget the very people we serve. We need to be busy for the Lord, but never too busy as to be ultimately away from His presence. Even as parents need to toil there for their children, but never too much as to miss the very children they are toiling for. Doing justice, giving others their due, giving God too His due, in a spirituality that integrates faith and life. All this will assure that biblical promise we have just proclaimed. He who does justice will live in the presence of the Lord. Thank you, and God bless you.